I'm raising a vibe.
Well, hello there, all of you beautiful awakening wonders of the world. It's Wendy here with Raise the Vibe Initiative. Back today with a very exciting topic, a very exciting guest. Today, the show is entitled The Spirit-Body Connection. And I have Dr. Joe Delaney on the show today, who is such a cool guy because he is the perfect balance of science and spirituality, which I think is really cool. I know a lot of people can appreciate that scientific perspective, and I love to be able to bring in how the two of them can connect with each other. So a little bit about Dr. Joe. He has a PhD in medicine. He is a scientist and a fellow of the Bio Institute of Medical Services, as well as a member of the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine. He's really doing so many different things. He's an independent consultant in lifestyle medicine, and he's also a recognized professor of psychology with the University of Liverpool and an associate lecturer in postgraduate medical education at Edgehill University in the United Kingdom. Previously, he has worked as a senior research fellow in medicine at a large university, teaching hospital, exploring the use of lifestyle interventions alongside pharmacological methods for treating hypertension patients suffering from diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and chronic kidney disease. In line with the above role, Joe was appointed the country's first NHS Specialist in Integrative Health Practice. And for over 40 years, Dr. Joe has been helping individuals to rediscover themselves and to help them back from the debilitating effects of stress, anxiety, depression, and addiction in various forms. Alongside with his scientific and educational background, he also comes to us as a Reiki master, a certified lifestyle and mindfulness coach, and a sports and remedial massage therapist. Besides these, he is a jolly nice chap in a nutshell. Joe describes himself as a scientist, shaman, showman, and scoundrel with a wicked sense of humor. So there you go, folks. Without further ado, I would like to welcome you all to Dr. Joseph Delaney. Hey, everyone. So as you can see, I've got a very, very special guest. Thank you so much to Dr. Joe Delaney today for being here with us on Raise the Vibe Initiative. It is a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Joe today. He is just such an interesting amalgamation of so many things. Dr. Joe is a respected PhD in medicine, a professor in his field, as well as a leader in the consciousness movement. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation today because we can really take it from not only a scientific perspective, but we can also bring in that sort of consciousness piece, which I am really excited to see how we can amalgamate all of this together. Really, the idea behind the show for me today is how can we physically be in our best health? And what can we be doing, within our spiritual practice to really sort of bring everything into balance, and just be balanced on all levels. Quickly, I will just bring up your YouTube. He has 2 YouTube channels. One has some amazing lectures. I am Connection the IM connection live and also getting real with Dr. Joe. Now, I wanted to actually, I was watching a few of your lectures and you were talking about the IM presence. And I thought this is really interesting and maybe a cool place to start. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what that is.
Certainly. The reason I sort of got into the spirituality side of things is that I was very ill for a long, long time. And I didn't know it, I suffered years and years of stress and anxiety and depression. And the people around me kept saying to me, Joe, if you carry on at this pace, you're going to have a nervous breakdown. Now, Wendy, I couldn't understand what they were saying to me because I was in a high-powered position in the UK's National Health Service. I was going places rapidly. I was climbing the ladder of success. We were making loads of money. We were having 3 holidays a year. And basically, to all intents and purposes, I was successful in the material world. And yet the people around me were saying to me, we're losing you, Joe. We're losing contact with you. Where is the Joe that we used to know? And I didn't know what they were talking about. And then what I did was then I used to use alcohol then to make me relax or help me feel relaxed. And then as the years went on and the stress increased in my first job, I was a biomedical scientist, so I worked in what they call a pathology department. And as I say, I was doing a PhD all those years ago as well. The stress got worse. The administration got worse. All the paperwork became just too much to handle. And I was becoming more and more tense and unhappy. So I started to drink more and more. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the drink really got hold of me and I became addicted to the alcohol. And then what actually happened then over the next few years, I started to lose things that were precious to me. So I lost my marriage, I lost the kids, I lost my job, I lost my car driving license. I lost my liberty, and then I lost my home as well, and I ended up homeless. Right. So that's the start of the story. I don't know whether that's put people off already, and then what happened was then I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I used to think that I was a quick learner, but it took me 9 years in AA to get the message. Wow. And the message of AA is, for anybody who doesn't know, it's not a cult or anything like that, according to me. This is just my personal opinion. The message of AA is what you're looking for isn't outside of you, it's inside of you, And they helped me through various steps. They helped me to clear a channel, if you like, to the core, essential part of who I am. And the I am, as you know, is the I am presence, is the essential part, the unconditioned part of people that's not touched by materialism, that just is there, it's ever present. And if you turn your eyes the other way around and stop looking outwards for answers and start looking inwards, and I say, rather than expecting, start inspecting, really. And once I started to inspect what was actually going on within me, I realized that I was nothing more than some sort of programmed automaton. Right. This is a long way to answer your question, but I will get back to it in a second. But I started to realize that all my beliefs, all the ideas, all the emotions, all the attitudes that were running my life were basically nothing to do with me. They were basically to do with how everybody else thought I should live. And that's when the light went on, really. And if you can remind me what your question was, I'll try and answer it.
Well, it was basically, I guess how you found the I am and what it is, Yeah.
Right. Well, as I say, I didn't realize at the time, but I was just a half a person, really. I just worked from my left brain, which is associated with linear, logical, and, very sort of unwavering, really, very, very straight line, And I trusted science wholeheartedly, but I didn't realize that there was another part of me that was knocking on the door saying, excuse me, there's another half here that you're not paying attention to. Do you think that you could possibly stop for a second, right, with your egomania? Stop with your egomania and climb in the ladder of success. And can you listen what we're trying to tell you as well? And I know now, if you like, that was the sort of the feminine side of me, the creative side of me, the artistic side of me, the right brain side of me was trying to break in. And when I drank, it almost closed that off, right, and made me feel normal because I was only getting one stream of information. So anyway, to cut a long story short, I went through what's called the program of recovery of AA, and my whole life changed completely. I woke up one morning and I looked out onto the world, and it was a completely different world. And it's when, I think, for 9 months then, I was floating on cloud nine. I had a massive spiritual awakening, and I just started to see everything as it really was. And on one of those occasions, a sort of, not a voice said to me, but a really, really strong um, load of thought came in to say, you need to write about and construct the I am presence, right? Or the I am approach to health and well-being. So I talk to this presence in me now. I say, what do you mean by that? And it says, I am stands for internal asset management. And I say, can you explain? And this is how I talk to my inner guru, if you like. I say, what do you actually mean by that? Well, Joe, most people are always trying to improve things that they're not naturally good at. But I am stands for digging deep, finding out what you're naturally and innately inclined towards, something that gives you enthusiasm and energy. And that's really where your mission, your purpose, and your joy of living lies. And so I then went along, and that's what I do, to be honest with you, Wendy. Every morning I sort of tap on my heart. I can feel a connection happen. And I can't really explain this fully, but it's just feeling that I have a depth, and it's like, hello, we're here. And I say to this presence then, what's on the cards today? And then I wait for a feeling and almost like an inspiration or an intuition that says, this is what we need to do today. And so I wake up every day with a clean sheet. I sort of let go of yesterday and just work every day at a time and act upon the information received. And my life has changed. I mean, it's been 32 years now since I've touched a drink of alcohol or any mind altering substances, And my big thing now is to help people to come out of the artificial programmed automaton world, to reconnect with their intuition and inspiration, and then to be guided by that now, really, because I honestly feel that will create a better world. The choices that they make will come from their depths rather than from sort of tricky dicky head. Yeah. Over to you, Wendy. Ask me another.
Well, I like that. Internal asset management. I have never heard that one before, and I think that's perfect. Wow. Okay. So that was wonderful, and thank you for sharing that with me. I guess that's sort of leading me into, again, listening to you speak in some of your lectures on the connection point between, the I am, the internal asset management and the neuroscience approach. So where do these amalgamate in the middle?
Well, it's a sort of inspiration that comes to me, and I sort of get told from within, if you like, or guided, or whatever that thing is in me that's guiding me. I follow that now because it's the most important thing in my life, And this is how it works, Joe. If you want to call yourself a consultant in psycho, neuro, endocrino, immunohematology, I said I will do, but what does it mean? Well, it means, Joe, psycho means mind. Whatever gets processed in the mind sends information to the nervous system. The nervous system then sends information to your endocrine or endocrine glands. The endocrine glands secrete substances into the blood. Those substances then impact upon the stem cells, and the stem cells then express DNA according to how you've processed information from your mind. Because, Joe, there's no such thing as mind and body. Mind-body is connected. So what's going on in your mind will send information to your body, and what goes in your body will feed back to your mind. And that's what evolution's all about. Does that make sense? So it's that's the connection, really. So what it meant to me was that basically how we think becomes who we are.
Yeah, that makes very good sense. I think what we're telling ourselves oftentimes, we are going to see that manifest, whether it's positive things or we're mindful of what we're thinking, or perhaps maybe we're not mindful of what we're thinking, and also seeing, what could manifest as a result of that. Right. Okay, thank you. So then I guess the next question I wanted to dive into was, physical health and people, it does appear, and maybe I just actually that touched on that, is that there are a lot of people that are struggling with their physical health through this time, right? And there's a lot of conditions that we're seeing, a lot of dis-ease is what I call it, right? Something's out of order. We're seeing that in the physical, but how could we use the link, or what are some things that people could become mindful of to really start sort of, and I want to be careful with the words that I'm using because but I guess improve their physical health, from that perspective, what can they be doing?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, and what I learned from my PhD, was that breathing affects the way the heart works, and the way the heart works affects the way your head works. So if we change the way that we breathe, we change the signal that's put back, that's given out from the heart. That information then goes back to the head or the central nervous system, and in fact, it actually affects the way our brain waves work. So the first thing we need to do is become aware of our breathing. And apparently this is a sort of central, it's root of a lot of Buddhist philosophies. And I don't do religion anymore. I've let all that sort of stuff go, but I do spirituality. But spirituality to me means energy. How do we gain energy? How do we use energy? And how do we give energy away foolishly and burn it when we don't need to? Because most of the people I'm working with who come and see me, they just say, Doctor, I'm tired all the time. I'm exhausted. I've got no energy. There's so many things that I'd like to do, but I just haven't got any energy. So the first thing is mindful breathing is important. Excuse me. And is to become aware, because as you can get into a rhythm with your breathing, and I'll explain this a bit more later, what actually happens is you can send a much more what they call coherent signal back from your heart to your head. And because we make decisions from our head eventually, it's those decisions that we make that determine the quality or the lack of quality of our life. But most of the time, we don't know that we're breathing erratically because we're on automatic pilot most of the time. Okay, and so what we actually do is, and there's lots of stuff here, but 1/5 of our information, let's say 1/5 anyway, just to sort of simplify things, 1/5 of our information we process in our conscious mind. But they use what's called the iceberg analogy. 4/5 of the information is being processed in our emotional mind, right? 4/5, and we're not even aware of it. Okay. So really, it's the emotional part of our nature that sends information back to our conscious mind that determines the choices we make. And most people either make choices based upon fear or pride. There's only really those two things. Pride says, I know what you're talking about and I don't need to change. And fear says, I can't do it because it's too difficult. So if you can understand those two components, and this is actually what transpersonal psychology, transactional psychology is about. It's really about different ego states. There's a child, there's a parent, and in the middle, the balance point is supposed to be a balanced adult. But most of us don't get to the adult. We actually just flip between the dominating parent and the frightened or rebellious child. So I've digressed a bit there, but what I'm trying to say is what I learned was that the simplest way to get into a coherent state, and for anybody who knows, has heard about the Institute of Heart Math in the United States, Institute of Heart Math, they've been doing this for a long, long time. And I would suggest that they are the leaders in this field. All the information's there, free of charge, if you want to, So a lot of the stuff that I've done, I've sort of worked alongside them for over 20 years now. But what it's about is, if you put your hands on your heart, you just sort of put your hands on your heart and you just slightly press. So you get a feeling where your heart is, slightly press on that. And then imagine that you're actually breathing from the palm of your hands a gentle, warm, kind, loving type feeling. So bring to mind first, this is where we can use our mind. We can use our mind to bring in a picture that brings with it a feeling of love. I know that I can talk about love on this, but if I was talking to medicine, I probably wouldn't use that word. But we can bring this feeling of love and care and compassion, and we can start breathing that feeling in and out of our heart. So as we breathe that love in, we collect all the gunge that's built up inside of us, and then we breathe it all the way back out. And so it's almost like the energy that we're breathing from the palm of our hand is like a cleansing energy. So the more that we can breathe that in, collect all the gunge that's built up and breathe it all the way out. Now, as we breathe out, we start to drop our shoulders. We can allow our eyes to relax. We can allow our jaw to relax. We can allow all our body to relax as we sink deeper and deeper and deeper into this beautiful state of coherent breathing. So we breathe in the warmth, 2, 3, 4, 5, stop, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the out breath's very important because most of us, we breathe in more than we breathe out. And because we breathe in more than we breathe out, all the energy that's not expended tends to accumulate in our cells, and that's why sometimes when people really kick off and they really express their anger, they feel much better afterwards because it's a temporary way to offload all this stuff that's built up. So there's lots involved here because you're breathing, the way we breathe, the amount we breathe in, the amount we breathe out, right, impacts really upon how we feel. How we feel determines what we choose. What we choose determines the quality of our life.
Absolutely. And it's almost like an automatic reset, really, as well.
It is.
Of coming back into that mindfulness piece, take a moment, and just connect with yourself.
But that's it. And what it is really is, it's basically most people just work off an interaction between our left and our right hemispheres of our brain. And so the decisions get made by jumping back from one side to the other. What happens is when we triangulate it and we focus on a feeling at the level of the heart, what actually happens is it brings those two streams of consciousness together, and we almost allow our heart to make the choice of these two separate inputs. And so there's a sort of a unifying force that brings the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. It brings them together in a feeling of kindness, care, compassion. I call it intelligent kindness. It's not soppy at all. People think it's like woo-woo, but there's loads and loads, there's thousands and thousands of papers now in neuroscience to show that this heart rate variability biofeedback works well for all the systems of the body. So like you say before, this is a whole body reset from the heart.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Wow, you've given me already lots of gold.
It's my job. I think what we do is people like ourselves, we've practiced this a bit. I think all we need to do is honestly share what's happened to us, say what we've learned up to now, with the hope that we're always going to be learning something new. So it's just by sharing experience, strength, and hope with each other.
Definitely. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. And that leads me now into my next question. And you had touched in a little bit on DNA. And I actually wanted to share with you, I have been doing some work into the gene keys, Richard Rudd's gene keys. Are you familiar?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I'm finding it actually quite fascinating, and I'm hoping to have Richard on at some point to put it out there. But the whole subject of DNA has been coming up for me a lot. And then the question lies in various circles. I guess it depends, where you're tuning in, but there's a lot of talk on upgrading our DNA. Right. And if that is a possibility, what are your ideas on the DNA, and is it possible to upgrade our DNA structure?
Well, I look at it in a slightly different way. I think the core, or I am presence, is the core template. And I think that that's already perfect. That is the upgraded template for all human beings. And I think what's happened is it's more epigenetics that's the problem. And epigenetics to me is like a shroud that has covered over eons of time. It's a shroud that's covered the full expression of our DNA. Now, some people say, we have 2 strands of DNA in medicine. Some people say, well, there's actually another 10 strands that aren't being used in the morphogenetic fields and stuff like that. Now, I understand quite clearly about morphic resonance because I'm also a Reiki master and a healer as well. So I'm actually a subtle energy medicine practitioner. Now, the medicine people I work with, right, they don't accept this at the moment, and I'm not trying to force anything down people's minds, throats or anything like that. But I didn't know anything about subtle energy medicine until somebody said to me, "Why don't you go along and sit in a healing circle?" I said, "Well, tell me what a healing circle is." And they said, "Well, what actually happens is you relax to such a point that you start to feel a different energy." Now, I remember my head inside saying, "Oh, I'm not having that. What a load of old nonsense that is." And they looked at me because it's almost as if they could tell what I was thinking. They looked at me and said, look, why don't you just try it and see what happens?" And you know what happens then is you go and sit in a circle with people, you drop into a deep meditative stance, and suddenly you can start feeling an energy sort of coursing around your body. And that was another wow. I never knew that was going on. And that's the way I feel every day. I scratch the surface and something new pops up. So, to cut a long story short, there may well be 10 aspects of junk DNA that aren't, they're just blocked up and obstructed by years and years and years of programs and conditions that we've naively fallen into. And now, as this great shift of consciousness is sweeping across the globe, it's sort of the pressure's increasing to allow people to wake up and to realize that they've sort of almost like been programmed into slavery. I didn't know we were going to get into this, but that's what I started to see, that I was really a victim because of my naivety, or maybe I chose that at some sort of deep level, I don't know, right? But I've really been a victim, right, of other people's ways of life. And that was when I started to wake up and start to become, if you like, an independent thinker. So, yes, I do feel at one level that, again, it's not ascension to me. I think what it is, I mean, if you say ascension, it sort of assumes that there's a descension as well. I think what's happening is that as these sort of filters and shields start dropping off, it's our consciousness that starts to expand, and we start to see then where we've been blocked and the actions we need to take to sort of free ourselves. Does that make some sort of sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Yeah, it's a different perspective. I sort of believe that we kind of descend for the purpose of ascending,
Yeah.
which I guess is sort of similar, depending on how you word it, and then through that ascension process, exactly, it's leaving the false programs, leaving the false self behind, and really coming back into your higher integration of the heart space, perhaps.
Yeah, I agree. And when people talk about higher, to me, it's deeper, you see, because the deeper I go, the higher I get, you see. Or, in a way, the deeper I seem to sink and let go. Because to me, it's about letting go of everything at one level and totally accepting the whole process. And in that sort of surrender, if you like, we're not surrendering to something outside of ourselves. We're actually just digging deeper, not even digging really, falling deeper into the next level of our evolution. I think that's how it works. And then it plateaus out because the way it works for me is this, I sink deeper, a new sort of influx of energy comes in. And for a while, I think I've made it until it plateaus out. And then you have to think, and the next one says, okay, that was that one. Do you see what you needed to see? Yeah. Okay, then here comes the next bit, and that's why it's almost like the eternal progress of the soul, some people call it, and when I say soul, soul to me means source of unconditional love. That's what I work with every day, the soul. I'm not a religious person, but it's just handy because most people have a feeling of what that is. It's a deep feeling within, so I'm trying to live my life from the soul and with soul, and it's changed my life absolutely, completely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real interesting process. I know when you're talking, it's almost like we're consistently going through initiations. That's sort of the pathway of the soul.
Yeah.
Is to continually just keep on the evolutionary journey, if possible. Yeah. Right? Yeah.
No, I agree. And people say, you must be a master. I don't think I've got anything mastered. I don't think I've got anything like sorted, because, that one when they say, I know nothing. I really do. I've realized that we're only ever touching the surface and there's just far too much just to know, maybe in one lifetime or one dimension or one, sort of line of time. I don't know. And I don't really care, to be honest with you, Wendy. I work with how I feel, and
Right.
really, I think if I get into over analyzing stuff, and even worse, labeling stuff, if I start to label something, that's a danger for me. So I live in this sort of anonymous, and anonymous to me means without a label. It means don't label it, because I think as soon as you label it, it can become a belief. And when you're in a belief, it can become a block, really. So almost my life is it's living beyond belief, right? In this sort of no name land, but just loads of feelings. That's how I tend to work.
Mm-hmm. So being very sort of conscious of then, I guess, your emotional state. And again, coming down to that, I like the mindful breathing. Take a minute, connect, come in. What are you thinking about? How is it making you feel? How is your body responding to these emotions? Becoming aware of these emotions. Very good.
Oh, good, good. But I think on the feeling one, I think any feeling of stress or tension can only be ego. That's what I've learned. It's an ego attachment, and sometimes your conscious mind can't see what's going on, but it's because emotionally you're processing something that represents a threat to the ego. And people will call that a trigger. And really, when you get to a stage when you realize all triggers are there to show you where you're hanging on and processing information either from a fear-based point of view or an arrogance-based point of view, that's when I get a grip anywhere now in the body. I try and stop, shut my mouth, get into mindful breathing, take a step back, look at the stage of my life, and say to me higher power or my heart or my soul or whatever the thing is, that feeling, I'll say, what are you trying to show me, or what can I glean or learn from this? And I'll get something like, you said yes there, Joe, when you should have said no. Right. So you're back into people pleasing mode. Go back now and saying that you've made a mistake and you've changed your mind, because it's okay to change your mind. And little Joe then comes in, oh, do I have to? And big Joe says, you know you do. Go and do it. And the quicker you do it, the more you'll get back into the flow. And that's what my life's become all about. If I get a grip, I automatically go backwards now and not forwards. Because previously I used to go into fight and flight. It's called an amygdala hijack. It blocks you off from any clear conscious thinking, and it just puts you on the defensive. And Wendy, that when you're on the defensive, you can't be creative. And there are nefarious and unscrupulous forces in this world, all part of the great game, who would have you in fear all the time, so that you can't think creatively and you can't find solutions for the very many problems that the world's going through, what they call the wicked problems of the world. And I think really, in order to go forward now, it's to become mindful, to create space, and to allow new ideas to emerge and take action on them, really. And those ideas will be novel. Novel means brand new, and they'll be creative. They won't be something that's rehashed and rebadged from the past. It'll be something completely new. See, I'm on one now. I've become like the Pope, the proper Pope. Oh, did I say that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're giving me a lot of things to think about today, for sure. Um, so I guess that bringing back to, okay, and again, I want to word this in the right way. Okay, maybe for some of the guests that are watching, maybe they're just starting to get to a place where they're saying, okay, I'm open to this mindfulness. They're taking a moment, it's starting to become more mindful. But now these thoughts might not be very positive thoughts. Maybe we're becoming aware that these things are kind of going on and we're thinking these things, not even realizing it until we become mindful. How does one then, recognize those thoughts without judgment, let's say, or, what do they need to do to kind of raise themselves to the next level in that process?
Well, I've learned in order to raise yourself, you've got to let yourself go. And you actually allow the energy that's deeper within you to raise you. I don't think that we can raise our vibration. I think our vibration raises us. And that means to surrender to this deeper wisdom that resides in us, really. So the ego mind, the conscious mind, the human mind has to surrender to this deeper wisdom. With this deeper wisdom and consciousness stream comes an uplifting power. And then it's to listen to that then, really. And so that would be the first thing, is to, if you're really feeling stressed and anxious and depressed and worried and concerned about the future, and you've tried every thought that you've ever thunk, and you're just getting worse and worse, that may be the time to say, hang on, well, I'm listening to these two people here. Something in me is perhaps resonating with what they're saying. Maybe I'll give this a fair trial, what they're talking about, really. And one thing I've learned is, right, I learned a long time ago, excuse me, that fighting, there's no point in fighting at all. Absolutely no point in fighting anybody or anything. And then people will say, but look at the state of the world. Surely we need to stand up to this. And what I've learned is, what you see out of your eyes has already materialized. It's almost there. It's almost, if you fight against that, it's almost like shadow boxing. So Buckminster Fuller, who was a clever fella, he said there's absolutely no point at all, right, in giving any energy to the fight. What you need, basically, this is me paraphrasing it, what you need is to get round it and create good stuff based from the heart and push that out. Give no energy whatsoever. And because this thing is getting no energy, it will automatically die off in time. Okay. And I think, again, lots of people talk about there are forces at work that would have you afraid because they feed off fear. So one of the biggest things that I found out in my life is fear is a real problem. I'm not saying don't be cautious. Cautious is important because caution's balanced, but to be fearful just feeds, if you like, the opposition. Let me try and put it that way. So to fight and to protest and to moan and groan and all that is a waste of energy. It's the energy that we need to take us forward to create a brighter world, a more light-hearted world, a more equal world, really.
Yeah.
I feel like, see, I've become like a religious leader now all of a sudden.
Don't get culty, Dr. Joe. No.
Okay, I won't.
Um, no. I wonder, have you ever seen that meme? And when you're talking about that, the picture shows up in my mind of the magnetic resonance around the two different vibrations. So there is the fear vibration, and it is showing a very small, dark electromagnetic field. And then it's showing somebody in the love vibration, and their field is humongous, right? Like it's like the size of a block, and so it is sort of interesting too, kind of based on, where you are on that particular scale when you become mindful of, those emotional states, what may manifest in your world of matter. Because, I can certainly, when it's an interesting game, because you start to look at it where, yeah, I mean, everybody drop into fear sometimes, or, into an emotion that is not necessarily pleasant, or an unconscious emotion. And you may find your exterior, you know, your world outside of you is a reflection of very much of, you know, what you're really feeling, you know, on a deeper level, where you may be in a really high vibration and notice, you know, you're in a beautiful garden somewhere, or you're on a beach, or there's flowers, or you know what I mean? Versus you're in a fearful state, and now you're maybe, you know, attracting, you know, different folks in that you know may not be of the highest residence or what have you. But do you have anything to share on that
Oh,
concept?
absolutely. I think that was perfect explanation. I think the two spheres, if you like, one's ego contracted. So one's based on fear, it's based on defensiveness, and it's based on an ego threat. So whether you're consciously afraid of something or your unconscious mind, and people say, no, I'm not processing stuff unconsciously. And I say, hang on, it's called unconscious because you don't know. Right. So how do you know? By the way that you feel. Okay, so if you feel open and flowing, just keep going. And if you don't, stop. Take a step back, create some mindful space, come into what they call the 0 point or the neutral point. And in that point, you'll be able to see a bigger picture. You'll have a lot more options. How do you know which option to take? Well, in your mind, choose an option and see if it gives you an expanded, enthusiastic feeling or see if it closes down. And that's the way I choose now. I'll go, I'm not quite sure which to take here. There's about 10 different options. So I'll go, what about that one? Maybe. What about that one? What about that one? So I go through the whole menu of options. You know, it's a bit like going to a restaurant, isn't it? And picking what you feel like eating at the time and stuff. So you've got this menu of options. The one that opens up and gives you a flow and uplifts you, I would suggest take that one and see how you get on. What if you make a mistake? No problem. You just say, oh, no, that's not the one. Just come back and try something different. There's no problem making mistakes. But to go into the how do you know you're in an expanded state and how do you know in a contracted state? By the way that you feel, not the way that you think, the way that you feel. And that's how I live my life now. I trust this intuition. Most of the time, my logical mind can't get its head around it. But I know now because and do I make mistakes? Of course I do. I'm only learning like everybody else. It's just that I've maybe practiced it for a bit longer than a lot of people, really. Yeah. So yeah, the big one, you know, and that's where the Institute of Heart Math, they actually show that great big sort of torus, this great big torus, you know. And the other thing is as well is it's not two-dimensional. This is like a sphere that surrounds us, you know, and people will call that the aura. When your heart's open and flowing, your soul's fully expressing itself. You're completely and utterly shielded. But the most important thing I've learned is that what your heart gives out attracts to you. And this is the real secret of attraction, that what you give out, you get back. However, if you think that you can influence it with your head, you're probably on the wrong track there. This is really not what your head wants, but what your soul wants. And that's the real secret of attraction. And sometimes your soul will choose something that your head definitely doesn't want. But when you get into understanding that once you take the action, that the head benefits at the same time. Does that make some sort of sense?
Absolutely. And then I also ask, you know, at what point does it all become integrated? You know,
Yeah.
and
Sorry.
well, you know, the whole idea of our multidimensionality has been coming into my awareness a lot. And so now that we may become conscious of, okay, the stuff that we've just talked about, how do we now integrate so that this is unconscious competence? We're just in the flow, right?
Yeah, the way that we integrate it is by keeping the head out of the way.
Yeah.
You know, because once you start analyzing it, it assumes that you know what's coming next, and that's the problem. Really, we have to trust the process. That this thing is, it's more, it's like a supervisor. And super means over, and visor means to see, doesn't it? So it's got this expanded view. This is what I've also learned as well. Is I've learned that there's got to be a sequence. It's got to be in a particular sequence because we've laid obstructions down in a sequence.
Mhm.
They have to be disentangled in the same order that they got laid down in. So if you're using your intellect or you're reading about it, it may be on the wrong path there. So that's why you have to trust your intuition and say, please give me what I need now to unlock further potential. And I always finish off with the thy will, not mine be done. It's almost like a sort, it's a bit like religious stuff, but it's almost saying that my head is surrendering to something that's more powerful. Not, it's the next part of me. It's not something outside of me. It's just the next part of my soul's evolutionary journey.
Yes.
So it's really all about the way we've scripted ourselves as human beings. It's about our individuality, and it's about unlocking potential in the correct sequence. They're called flashline sequences, really. And that's why you might have, let me just explain something. What I've been shown is that the 12 cranial nerves, this is how things come to me. The 12 cranial nerves are apparently attached to the 12 meridians. So I'm saying, okay, show me what you mean. Well, Joe, the cranial nerves work by electricity, but the meridians work by magnetism. And what's actually happening now is there's a great shift in consciousness now. Here's where I get woo-woo now. Because what's actually happening is that the great central sun, and I say, hang on, what do you mean the great central sun? Well, that's really the origin of this universe, right? The great central sun, right, is aligning now. So more and more energy is coming through. It's a rebalancing energy that's associated with the sacred feminine. And I'm like, oh, here we go. What are you saying? Look, Joe, just listen, Joe, will you? Right. The sacred feminine's had their nose pushed out for a long, long time. Now she's coming back, but in a gentle, kind, and nurturing way. She's coming back to guide the masculine into taking the right actions, right, and to stop being so self-centered. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to cause a bit of problems. Yes, Joe, but it can't be stopped. So your job is to help people to understand that this process is more powerful than them, and it's a natural resetting. It's not something that's being conjured up by any people on the planet. This is a natural great reset that's happening. And all you need to do is get your head out of the way, stop listening to the nonsense that's on the news, right? And just go with the feelings that are emerging from your heart. And I say, well, okay, then 12 cranial nerves, the meridians. So it's not an electromagnetic effect. Very good, Joe. It's a magneto-electric effect. And I said, well done, son. Well done. Explain to me what you mean by magneto. Well, it's the subtle, invisible energies that will impact the nervous system, will impact the electrical energy in the nervous system, which will change the way the DNA expresses itself. And I said, okay, that seems simple enough. Why didn't you tell me that before? And I get, because you wouldn't have understood it, silly boy.
Wow. Wow, yeah, it's very interesting. Well, the nervous system, that's kind of the central point of all of it, right?
No, it's the receiving point, really, because the subtle energies coming in, aren't they? The subtle energies are coming in through the 7 major spinal chakras, and they're like those whirling vortices of energy. So they're being fed now at those 7 points. Well, the 7 chakras are actually the invisible counterparts to the 7 major endocrine glands, and there's much more here. So we're all imbalanced in certain glands. But if you think that you're imbalanced, let's say in the solar plexus, but it's really your sacral chakra that needs working on, you'll always be working on something that's not in the right sequence. So that's why we have to say, please show me through my feelings and through inspiration and guidance what I need to work on here. And they'll say, you need to work on your hip area, your lower back area, and you need to take into account these things. And then, because that seems quite difficult, you say, can't I just work on the solar plexus or the heart today? And you get like you can work on anything you like, but you might be doing it for a long time. So why don't you just listen to what we're trying to show you, right? And do that and see what, So it's almost like being guided by if you like, some people would say like a guardian angel. They see the soul as like a guardian angel. Other people feel that they're being sort of guided by extraterrestrial forces. It doesn't matter to me, Wendy. I don't get too ensconced in any of that sort of stuff. I just stick with my feelings and do what I need to do just a day at a time, really. Because if my head goes off into guardian angels and cherubim, seraphim, oraphim, and everybody else, Elohims and stuff like that, my head's off, and I'm missing the point of what they're trying to show me through my feelings.
Right. And the embodiment of being with that, right? Grounding it, being with it, not letting yourself be
Yeah.
in places at once.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happening now. We've got access to so much external information now. They're really the distractive forces. They're not the attractive forces, they're distractive, and they can keep us externally based for information. See, people say to me, and they send information to me, and they say, here's a good book that you should read. Right. And I said, no, thanks. I said, I get my information from inside. Anything I do read is more for confirmation now, not for information. And they say, what do you mean? I say, well, I sort of get the information first, and then I can read like a sort of comic magazine, and it will just give me, it'll go, and I'll read it in something else. It'll be there about 5 times, and it may just say something as simple as just turn left at the bottom of the street or something like that.
That's
Simple, really simple.
like, I don't know if you're familiar with Ishmael Perez. He's interesting. He's written a book as well, but he talking about the super consciousness, the superhuman, the super consciousness, right? That we're our own technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, when we're able to tap into that, and again, I call it the heart space from a feminine perspective, that, there lies a lot of, well, it's a supercomputer.
I agree. I agree. I totally agree. And I think that each human being has, at the moment, 12 different compartments. It's allied to the 12 sphere tree of life, and that's because I spent 25 years studying the ancient Kabbalah, because I was guided into that, and that was to do with archangels and gates and portals and stuff. But what I try and do is take that information and scientificize it and then break it down into chunks so it's more accessible to most people. And mostly, I would just say more than anything else is become aware of your breathing, right? And become aware of the way that you're feeling. And if you're feeling open and flowing, as I've said, just keep going because you're on the right path. And if you feel stuck, or anything like that, stop, take a step back, drop into your heart. It's a feeling, and just almost say to your heart, as though you're talking to an inner guru, just say, "I'm stuck here, and I'm not really sure what to do. I wonder if you've got time, and you're not too busy. I wonder if you could just send me an inspiration or some sort of intuition. I'm going to close this down, this communication now, and get on with my day. But if you feel it's the right time, send us a clue. And you know yourself, that's when all the synchronicities come in. 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14. And you think, I wonder why that's happening to me all the time. And that's because your intuition or higher command or whatever the hell you want to call it is given the information that you've asked for.
Yeah, and that's really fun. I also found, learning about my own intuition too, it's also like you have to become a detective a little bit. Like, for example, if we're going to be speaking on, let's say, physical health, I used to get trouble with my eyes a lot. I used to, get, I still get that sometimes, but, different, maybe have a pain here or a certain body part that is causing you grief or what have you. And I really, and I've used it through, I do some coaching. A lot of my clients, I've used the book, You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hayes. And I thought that was a brilliant book because it always seemed to be bang on, because I'd be like, for example, I would see a health condition show up for me. And then I would open up this book and look at it and it would say, wow, it's coming from here. And I go, that sounds really valid. It usually was bang on, right? And then also showing an affirmation of, okay, now we know where this is coming from. Let's hit the reprogram button and bring in some new energy to this. And it would clear up after time.
I agree. I think it's a fantastic book. When I first read it all those years ago, I thought, what a load of nonsense. And now I'm saying, how fantastic. Because the woman was obviously guided, she was getting all these things. So it's really about psycho, neuro, endocrino, hematology. And to understand that it's really about the power of the emotional body, not our conscious minds. So it's almost like we have to go below the neck almost and start to trying to listen to what I call our heart of hearts. Because I really think that our soul, with its curriculum, works through an open and flowing heart. It's that vibration that attracts the next lesson to us. So if we can see that life is like a journey, it's a hero's journey, you know, which is almost like a program as well. And there's probably 12 different stereotypes or archetypes of what you chose to do when you came here, you know. So it's to find who you really are, what essentially your innate abilities are. They're the assets or the innate abilities of the I am approach. And it's to work with those. And if your mind says to you, well, what about that? I can't do that. You say, no, that's nothing to do with you. That's for Wendy to do because she's got those skills. And that's the way groups form. And I almost like see in my mind, it's all about 12s. There'll be 12 people working together with 12 different skills and attributes that fit together perfectly. That 12 will find another group of 12. And it's almost like in my mind, I see like a football with all those dodecahedral shapes, like Buckminster Fuller, you know. So there's all those shapes going all around the globe, and like a big sort of what we call them jigsaws in the UK, but puzzle pieces. You know, it's like a spherical puzzle piece, but all the 12s are coming in to fill what's being missing. Really.
That is so cool that you bring that up, because 12 is a very significant number for me as well. And you bring in the dodecahedron. That is the round code with the flower and the 369 point.
Yeah, well, it's important because there's been a shift recently, without going too deeply into it, where we were sort of led to believe, if you like, that the tree of life had 10 spheres. But in actual fact, and they link this to the falling grace and fallen angels and stuff like that, but that's all been cleared up now. And we've been sort of reset, if you like, to a 12 sphere tree of life because we've been obstructed from our full potential. So, as I say, I don't get into sort of any negativity associated with that now because we're full on now. Everybody's now got the potential to work with who they fully are. And 3, 6, and 9, and 12 are important now because there's no obstruction now to the light coming through, you know. And something else that I've been guided to do is to help people to understand how sound and light are so important now, and how vibrational medicine and subtle energy medicine is the way forward. So the new medicine of the future, which is starting to come in, is really vibrational medicine. And this is Tesla, really. It's once you start to understand about energy, frequency, vibration, you'll understand how
those self-agio tones.
But yeah, for some reason the picture's gone off.
Oh, did I lose you? I can see you. Okay.
Oh, can you? Okay, there you're back in there.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so self-agio frequencies, but they'll be different from everybody. And I see in the future, they talk about med beds and things, but what I see is scanning frequencies of sound and light that will scan, and they'll sort of infiltrate the bits that are needed healing and blocking. So where people used to go for a sunbed tan, you know, and lie on a bed for half an hour and get blasted with ultraviolet rays, it'll almost be like a more gentle thing where they come out revitalized and stuff like that. So I think that the medicine of the future, and my colleagues don't like to hear this, but that's tough. The medicine of the future will be more inclined towards medical physics. And something that they've given me a name, it's called chromatooptogenetics. Chromatooptogenetics. And the chromatic, it means not only to do with color, but it's also to do with the 12 notes of the chromatic scale, for example. So there's the sound and light, but the optogenetics is about how energy actually works through the fiber optic system of our body and impacts upon the way the DNA expresses itself. So if there was any unscrupulous forces that were trying to mess around with our DNA, for example, I'll talk about this in code, right, then chromatooptogenetics would be a way to get behind that and to kick it out so it didn't have any impact, to see. And so we would be fully working from our bone marrow on this chromatooptogenetic principle, and that would actually shield us from anything that's trying to get in from the outside. Does that make sense? That's quite important, that bit I've just said there, but I'm not getting into the fight.
That's pretty cool. And that actually makes a lot of sense. And I don't want to dive in too much to getting into the discussion of, crystalline structures but it would seem to make very much sense that a tone then would be able to balance these frequencies.
We can use an atone to atone.
Yeah.
An atone, as we know, is at one, isn't
it? Yeah. It's an exciting time. It really is. And, I feel so blessed to be able to just be and finding, my soul family out there, people like yourself, all of these, people now coming together and, just lifting each other and lifting the world. I see this as such an exciting time. And I think we've come a far way, but, I think in the way of fear, I like to always say, like, don't be fearful. This is exciting. This is really exciting, right? And it doesn't matter where you are in your journey. Start there and just play. Right?
I agree. And the first thing to accept, isn't it, is to admit I'm afraid, because once you say that, you've almost like exposed the devil, for want of a better expression. And then you can talk it through with people. Because I think once you've done that and admitted I'm afraid, it almost like opens up, right, an area. And then I think what happens is we need to take actions then to outgrow fear. I don't think, because fear is so powerful, I don't think we can think our way out of fear because it doesn't generate enough power. So if we have to dip into the heart and allow the heart power to kick the fear out because we're taking actions in the right direction, So it's about, whether we like it or not, or whether I liked it or not, it's about growing up emotionally and taking personal responsibility for the choices that we make, And people sometimes don't want to hear that, but because they call me Dr. Lightheart, but I'm probably one of the most serious men on the planet. But if it's not joyful, Wendy, what's the point? It's got to be lighthearted. It's got to be fun.
Yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't mean to say that it's not difficult, because it is.
And we'll all be faced with, those things. But hey, if it doesn't feel good, change directions.
Yeah, exactly.
That conversation with my daughter today. Listen, if it's not feeling good, just change directions, right?
Yeah.
That's a better track. But anyway.
I think people have said, or turn the other cheek. That's looking in a different direction. Turn the other cheek.
Yeah, I always say, you very much end up being like the people you surround yourself with. So choose wisely.
Absolutely.
On that, well, Dr. Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today and with all of us. I hope that the folks out there watching were able to get some golden nuggets. I know I certainly did today, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. So I hope that, we can connect again in a little bit of time and see how you're doing and get another update. But I know you've been quite busy, so I do appreciate taking the time.
Oh, Wendy, it's been an absolute pleasure. And it's nice to talk to everybody, and I hope that they've got something useful from that. My view is, if one person gets help, then the job's done, really.
That's right. Well, I believe everybody that is supposed to hear this message will.
Absolutely.
That'll be exactly what they need to hear. So anyway, on that, lovely to see you. Thank you, everybody, for joining in, and just wishing everyone a wonderful day. Take care.
Thanks very much, Wendy. Speak soon, hopefully.